Coming up on the WAC podcast, happy holidays. It's our last show of the year. We're going to talk a lot of basketball for you basketball junkies. Drew Speraw is going to be in studio with us. He's the Associate Commissioner for Basketball, and we get into all kinds of topics with Drew. We're going to talk MLS draft. We had two players from the WAC selected this week for the MLS. We also had a new coach hired for Grand Canyon and plenty of big wins in hoops. That's all ahead on the WAC podcast.
This WAC podcast is brought to you by our friends at University Credit Union, the official financial institution partner of the Western Athletic Conference. Well, it's the most magical time of the year. It is the holiday season, our final show of 2023. What a year it's been for the WAC podcast. We've had some incredible guests on. We've covered some massive wins for our conference, and it's just been an overall great year. Our conference continues to rise multiple two-bid leagues in multiple sports, and it's just been really fun. And as we are recording this on Thursday, we're going to go for a nice holiday WAC lunch and then break for the holidays. Of course, we'll still be working remotely and keeping our institutions involved in everything that we're doing before the new year. But holiday is here, and, we're both traveling and getting ready to spend some quality time with our families.
Yeah, it is kind of funny that we're both going to be traveling and we're only going to be, 50 miles apart?
Goes away for Christmas break.
Not going to
30 minutes from your boss.
Heading to the Panhandle of Florida, two different spots for both of us there. But yeah, looking forward to a little break, but at the same time, maybe recharge the batteries a little bit. And then we come back. It's going to be sprint time to WAC Vegas.
It is. I mean, conference play gets underway that Thursday, January 4th, and then it's just nonstop conference play all the way till March. And of course, we have our other sports, our spring championships that will be getting underway, swimming and diving, indoor track and field. And so it's going to be a busy, busy time when we return.
So this past week, if you didn't catch it, Commish on Campus debuted, and this is a new initiative we have. Commissioner Brian Thornton goes to a camp. He travels around all the time. So we're sitting around. We're like, hey, how can we take advantage of this? Commissioner Thornton also likes to connect with student athletes. He's a former student athlete himself. He's a former coach, former NCAA administrator, and trying to put it all together. And so our first one's at Utah Valley. He had a chance to talk with Nikki Olanda, their outstanding women's soccer player, Nick Clemens, the thrower, who's going to be competing this year. Couple of really interesting conversations. They get into a lot of different topics, and Commissioner Thornton also has his take on his experience as a student athlete, what it's like with the NCAA right now, and NIL, all these different topics. So if you have a chance, it's on our YouTube page. If you go to YouTube/WAC Sports TV, that's our YouTube page. It's also up on our Facebook, and you can check the links also on X and I guess we couldn't put a link on Instagram, but there's some clips on there.
Yeah, there is a link if you copy it and you can open it in your web browser. But yeah, just a really cool thing. I mean, Commissioner Thornton, one of the most relatable things about him is he's not that far removed from being a college athlete, and he still has that perspective of what athletes are going through. And it was really cool to listen to him and Nikki Olanda's conversation, because she's debating her next steps. What is she going to do post-graduation? Does she want to play professionally? Commissioner Thornton played professionally, and so he was able to give some unique advice, having been through that situation for an athlete, or one of our student athletes that is weighing her options. And that's just the cool thing, is he's able to connect with student athletes on another level. And I mean, how many commissioners are out there having an hour-plus long conversation with a single student athlete, just trying to get to know them and help them in any way that they can? We always say we work for our student athletes, and that's a prime example of just how he's doing that.
Yeah, and the way he connects, and Nick, the thrower, it was interesting. It was on a part when we weren't rolling, but and I don't know if it would have made it in the show, but they wear the same size shoe, and they're talking about different shoes. He's as you said, not that far removed. I mean, far enough removed that he's a commissioner in a Division I conference, but also connected enough with student athletes that they can talk about shoes and clothes and travel and families and all kinds of different things. And Commissioner Thornton was an academic All-American, so he knows a lot about a lot of different topics too. So
Yeah, I mean, he gave Nick some advice on where to purchase his shoes because he was struggling. They're both the same shoe size. He's like, "Where do you get your new shoes?"
yeah, size
So
16s are hard to find.
yeah. But yeah, so that's pretty exciting. We'll have another one coming out in the new year. Grand Canyon will be the spot of the next commission on campus. So stay tuned for that. We have a lot of new things rolling out in 2024, a new hashtag that is already
Under wraps.
its way.
Under wrap. We put it back in the box.
We put it back. We popped it out, put it back. So a lot of fun things and good social media content coming next year. And we're really excited about pushing that.
And then the Road to WAC Vegas will be starting up January 4th. And then every week after that, leading up to WAC Vegas in March, we're going to have a new PSA coming out shortly with that. So a lot of things to be excited about with WAC basketball in particular. But we'll talk more about that in just a second. MLS draft was this week, and that's something used to always be in January, and then it moved last year, the World Cup. Because of the dates. They moved it to December, and I guess they decided, hey, let's keep it in December. 2 players from the Western Athletic Conference selected this year.
UTRGV had midfielder Brian Farquharson selected. He was a transfer from Houston Christian. He landed on second team All WAC at Houston Christian in 2022. Now he was first team All WAC this past year. He had 5 goals, 11 starts. And this is interesting because, UTRGV didn't make the WAC men's soccer tournament, but he was such a valuable asset to this team. And also San Jose State, who we did see in the tournament, Bo Leroux was selected. No surprise there. He spent 3 seasons at San Jose State, first team All WAC as a freshman, first team All WAC this past year, all region selection. He's just the player that when you talk to head coach Simon Tobin, he's just an absolute animal. He's one of his favorite players to coach. He's a guy that'll run through a brick wall for you.
And he's got one of the coolest names in the league.
I know, Bo Leroux. Can't go wrong with that.
So they were both taken in the second round, as you mentioned, with Austin FC selecting Farquharson, and then we had the San Jose Earthquakes, a hometown team, selecting Bo Leroux. So good luck to both of them. The MLS is kind of a weird season in that they have it this early, the draft. I believe they start their training camp in January, and then their season goes all the way through November.
Yeah, it is a very interesting season. Gets underway officially around March, I believe, and then it goes all the way to November. So this time usually is just the break time for all those MLS teams. Once that last game hits, they're off the grid trying to prepare and get ready for the new season. We also had Grand Canyon make a head coaching change as they brought on George Kiefer as the next head coach, and he's a guy that ranks 36th among 211 active men's soccer coaches, 211 victories, led South Florida and NC State to NCAA tournament appearances. And so he's just going to be a really valuable asset as, Grand Canyon looks to bounce back from not making the tournament this past year, as they're typically a perennial powerhouse.
And they'll be hosting the WAC men's soccer tournament next year as well. So yeah, very unusual for them not to qualify for the WAC tournament. So they do bring in Coach Kiefer, and he's got a couple of Division II national championships under his belt, as well as a lot of experience in the Power 5 realm. A couple of quotes were from Mike Noonan, the head coach at Clemson, who won the national championship this year, talking about how Coach Kiefer will be an outstanding leader for Grand Canyon. So very well-respected name in men's soccer. So I'm sure GCU is delighted to have him now leading the Lopes going into next season.
Absolutely. And we had some award winners as well. California Baptist's Nolan Premack was honored by the College Sports Communicators as being a 2023 academic All-America second team in Division I. Now, I've covered Nolan Premack for the last 2 years, and one, he's a phenomenal goalkeeper. He was the reason that the Lancers punched their ticket last year. He made that exciting PK save, and then this year he does it again. It doesn't go into PKs this year, but it actually did in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and he made a phenomenal save. But the story behind Nolan Premek is unlike any other. 4.0 pre-med major. He wants to be an orthopedic surgeon. He had double hip surgery when he was a player, and I think that influenced, where he wanted his career to go post soccer. And so really exciting for a guy that, really goes to work on the soccer pitch and gets it done in the classroom. He's got a bright future ahead.
Yeah, I was talking to Tony Jones, our men's soccer media contact, and about the draft and, Nolan Premak, and of course the success he had as a player and the fact that he didn't get drafted. But I think a lot of those factors that you just mentioned, I mean, when you're going into pre-med, you got a pretty good gig going there. So congratulations to him on an outstanding career and being named academic All-American. Grand Canyon's Gianna Gorley and Utah Valley's Sydney Bushman also named academic All-America in Division I by the College Sports Communicators. Gianna Gorley, of course, was the WAC Player of the Year. She was also academic first team in this, 3.92 GPA while pursuing an MBA. When we talked to Chris Sissel, the head women's soccer coach, he believes that she does have a future in the NWSL, and that draft will be coming up in January.
Yeah, certainly looking like a Marlene Shimmer type of pick. She went last year for Grand Canyon in the first round. And, Gianna Gorley has so many of those same qualities and is such a lethal weapon that any team would be lucky to have on their squad. She knows how to get it done. She's got savvy footwork, and she's just unbeatable in front of net.
So we're going to talk a lot of basketball with Drew Speraw, but wanted to hit on a couple of games before we get to him. UT Arlington winning a big game over Air Force of the Mountain West. That game was played at Dickies Arena as part of a kind of a festival with several other Division I games there. CBU beating UC Riverside. If you've been to Riverside, that's their big rival. That's where California Baptist is. UC Riverside just a few miles away. So anytime they beat the Highlanders, they love that. ACU beating UTEP. That's one, kind of a rivalry game, if you will, but also part of the Conference USA Scheduling Alliance.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more with Drew in our next segment because he was actually at that game. But that was Abilene Christian's head coach, Brett Tanner, playing against UTEP's head coach, Joe Golding. Joe Golding used to be the head coach at ACU. Brett Tanner worked under him. And so pretty emotional as Abilene Christian gets that win. And, that was a lot of same players that, played in their NCAA Cinderella Story tournament run. They brought some of those players back. Some of them are still on the squad. And so just a really cool overall, game that wouldn't have happened without this WAC USA Alliance.
Seattle U played Washington to double overtime. Unfortunately, came out on the bad end of that, but then they bounced back, beat Louisiana Tech in overtime last night.
Yeah, no, that was a great matchup there as I just lost my sheet.
I'll continue then. Stephen F. Austin beating New Mexico State, of course, member of the WAC for a number of years, and traditionally a very good men's basketball team. So good win for SFA. And then GCU also handling Sam Houston, who was one of our top teams, I believe the top seed in last year's WAC tournament.
Yeah, the past 2 years, I believe that they've been really close to the top and in our semifinals. Grand Canyon's Gabe McLaughlin picks up back-to-back Player of the Week honors. He, had a double-double in 3 starts for the Lope, 26 points, 11 rebounds over Portland when they won that, and then had a season-high 10 field goals and assists, a block shot, and a steal. I mean, he's just packing the stat line. And he's also a great guy to get a chance to speak with. If you go over to our Instagram, we had a live with him. It's now posted and archived on our Instagram page after they beat San Diego State. So he's just a guy that's been around for a long time and is just, it's hard not to like him.
And I had a chance to watch that game against Sam Houston. Javon Blackshear Jr. making his home debut.
He's back.
He's back. Not quite. I mean, he he's not getting, I think he played 10 minutes. I don't know if he got a field goal in that one, but good to see him back on the floor. But, Tyan Grant Foster, Ray Harrison, Gabe McLaughlin, they're loaded, and they look to be one of the teams to beat in the WAC, definitely for the remainder of the year. Our newcomer of the week brought to you by Ticket Smarter, Philip Russell of UT Arlington. His debut as a member of the Mavs, he scores 28 points in 9 of 17 shooting in that win over Air Force at Dickies Arena.
What a way to make your debut. UT Arlington, a team that, is under new head coach this year, KT Turner. Weren't really sure what to expect from this squad this early on. It's really hard when you have a roster overhaul and to go from the wins that they had last year to now. And they're 5-5, and they're looking, or 6-4, excuse me. They're on a 2-game win streak, and they're a team that, is pushing that upper part of our bracket.
On the women's side, we saw Grand Canyon defeat Idaho on another buzzer beater by Nadia Evans.
My goodness, ice in her veins.
And in the notes done by Jess Radford, she took my Nadia or nice.
Yes.
Holiday.
She should have put in parentheses very small
courtcy.
Eric Danner. Whack.
But another big win for GCU. I mean, to win on the road at the buzzer, and they were the team picked to win women's basketball this year. So they are living up to those expectations. Utah Tech takes down Oregon. This was one of our interstitials that we have, the graphic. And then Utah Tech also hosted Oklahoma State. Talk about scheduling up, if you will, beating Oregon, and then playing Oklahoma State didn't beat them, but a couple tough games at home.
Yeah, when we talked to JD Gustin, head coach of the Trailblazers, last year he spilled at media day that their goal was to win a game in the WAC tournament. And you know what? They went to WAC Vegas. They did just that. This year I asked him what his goals were, and he said, we're going to keep those in-house, but we have big, big goals this season. I got to imagine that based on the schedule, getting a win this week between both of those quality opponents had to be one of them. That's just a great win. And, Emily Isaacson, who was also at media day, is out with a season-ending injury. She's done for the year, and the team is still finding ways to distribute the ball, get other players involved. Warren sisters are back from last year after both of them tore their ACL. And so that's really exciting to be able to see, this team kind of produce some high-quality wins.
Our Ticket Smarter Women's Player of the Week goes to Jacoria Long from Tarleton. She scores 34 points in a win over McNeese State, 88-64 on the road. So she is also the newcomer of the week. So Tarleton getting a big win there on the road.
Certainly. And Jacoria Long is a transfer from Blinn College, a JUCO school that is known for, getting athletes ready to play at that next level. And we're certainly seeing that with Jacoria Long, and, they're under new leadership over there as well with the women's basketball. And so pretty exciting, as you just look at the standings for WAC women's basketball this early on. A lot of parity, a lot of close contests. California Baptist really jumping out with that 9-1 record. They had 8-game win streak, and, then Grand Canyon, Stephen F. Austin, and of course, Utah Tech, like we just mentioned.
Yeah, Bill Brock, the new head coach at Tarleton this year, but of course he has a 40-year coaching resume, was at Baylor, a number of other schools, and has Tarleton getting a real big win there. It'd be interesting to see how they come together the second half of the year as we start conference play back up on January 4th.
I can't even believe it. We're going to come back from the holidays, and it is going to be full throttle, full speed ahead.
And we're going to come back from the break. When we come back, it'll be Drew Speraw in the studio. You're listening to the WAC Podcast. Welcome back to the WAC Podcast. Eric Danner, Kendra Sheehan, now joined by Drew Speraw, our Associate Commissioner for Basketball. And we're heading into the break, Drew, and you've watched a lot of basketball recently. We'll get more into that in just a minute. But as far as 35,000-foot view of how the basketball season is going, I know this is a very broad question to start with. How is your assessment of how the basketball season's going, starting on the men's side?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we've had some triumphs on the men's side for sure. We've had obviously Grand Canyon's kind of jumped out and been really, really good and have signature wins. The San Diego State at home, at Liberty, the San Francisco and Phoenix and their MTE. Played a pretty good schedule so far and have been able to be pretty successful. We have some other triumphs as well. I mean, just last night, Seattle taking down La Tech, who, on paper is a really, really good team, and it ends up being a quadrant 2 victory, which is good come tournament time, and helping build their resumes. And so we've also had great successes with teams like Stephen F. Austin and their MT early, getting a win versus Drake, what was very good for them. Abilene Christian at Oklahoma State. So I mean, we've had very good wins here and there and throughout the non-conference, and so I think we're setting up well. Obviously, we've sprinkled in a couple of conference games there, which has added a unique aspect to what we've done so far. And but early on, I think we're seeing some good basketball overall. We've seen some ups and downs in some of the teams, and looking forward to seeing how the rest of this year finishes off and really jumping into that conference play. And I think we'll have some good parity there.
Let me follow up on that. You mentioned quadrant 2 victory, and people into basketball are well aware of quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4. Can you kind of explain a little more how that's figured out? What's a quadrant 2 win, and what would that mean for a team like Seattle U beating Louisiana Tech?
Yeah, absolutely. The committee really takes on into account quadrant 1, quadrant 2 victories as really strong victories in the non-con or anytime during the year. But it's calculated really differently, and it takes into account whether you're home, a neutral site, or on the road. In Seattle's case last night, they were able to beat a La Tech team that was in the 60s, so they were top 75. So anywhere between actually top 75 ends up being a quad 1 win for them on the road, or at home it's 75 and below is a quad 1 win. On the road, 75 and below is or quad 1 win, excuse me, quad 2 win at home and a quad 1 win on the road. And so it's really calculated differently. If you play on a team on the road, in the top 75, it's quad 1. In the top 135, 76 to 135 is quad 2. And at home, we play a team 1 through 30 is quad 1, and 31 through 75 is quad 2. So you're really kind of fitting into those boats there. It's a little bit different on a neutral site. Top 50 is a quad 1 win on a neutral, and 51 through 100 is quad 2. So we've seen a couple of those great games happen so far. Grand Canyon ends up getting San Diego State, who's top 30 at home. That's quadrant 1. They get San Francisco, who's top 50 on a neutral site. That's quadrant 1. They get Liberty, who's top 75 on the road. That ends up being quadrant 1. And so you really kind of put those, the way it's a sliding scale kind of where the game is located. But those the committee takes those into account a great deal at the end. And as we get to the end of March and we start hearing the bubble talk and where teams sit, you hear that a lot. What are their records in the quadrant 1, quadrant 2 range? They take those as those quality wins, and then kind of measure them against, what they would consider to be poor losses, which would be in your quadrant 3 and quadrant 4 range. And so really you're trying to, gather as many of these quadrant 1, quadrant 2 wins as you can, and avoid as many of those quadrant 3, quadrant 4 losses as you can. And so that really helps you really build that resume.
It's year 2 of the WAC resume seeding system, and the goal of that was to put our teams in the best possible position to potentially be a 2-bid league and get somebody in as we kind of build our resume with the entire body of work that the NCAA committee looks at. And you see teams like Grand Canyon who have jumped to as high as 50, and depending on the net or Ken Palm rankings even higher. With year 2 of the WAC resume seeding system, from your perspective, how have you watched our teams just embrace that aspect, knowing that that's what's going to take to get that high seed in to come WAC Vegas and help raise and elevate the conference basketball as a whole as we keep climbing in those rankings?
Yeah, I think you see that, in the standings now. Obviously, the team that's built a really strong resume, as we've mentioned before, they've got 3 quad 1 wins, Grand Canyon on the men's side, and that kind of sits them where they're at. I think it makes the teams think about getting those quad 1 wins or quad 2 wins. It's really going to project them further in that seeding system and really trying to avoid those losses, which kind of knock you back a great deal. And so obviously they've embraced it to what they're trying to do in a scheduling standpoint. It puts a different emphasis on all these non-conference games as you're trying to learn and build your team. But they all have great value. A game like Seattle last night, yeah, has great value on where they line up, and they're going to get rewarded for that win when it comes, seating system time and as they build. So yeah, I think it makes them think about who they're scheduling. It makes them put some emphasis on every single game they play in the non-conference. And you kind of feel that as we get going. And so it also kind of puts teams in, kind of in order of, hey, this is who they've played so far. This is how well they've done so far. Doesn't necessarily, it's not a final product right now. We have a lot of games left to play. There's a lot of conference games. The conference aspect of the seeding system still is 2/3 of the games, right? There's 20 games in conference. You're going to play 11 other games max. So you have 31 games total. So it's really 2/3 of the work still. So the non-conference plays a good portion of it. You should get rewarded for some of those games that you win, especially the really valuable ones. But then, we're look to conference play, and that's really, really where we're going to get decided.
You mentioned the Louisiana Tech win and the Liberty win, and that's part of the Conference USA initiative that was put forward this year. And what was the idea behind that? And obviously, those two wins bode well for the league. But as far as what are we hoping to accomplish as a league, and do you see that working pretty well right now?
Yeah, it's worked out very well for the men's side so far. We've had some good success. When you look at all of the games, every single one of them, sans one, has been down to the wire, close games. Actually, a couple of them, I'd say we've won one that was out of hand. We probably lost one that was a little bit out of hand. But the rest of them have been really close, down the wire, overtime games, buzzer beaters, all those type of things. We've created good non-conference basketball. And that's really what the emphasis of was, that we're trying to get games that are valuable, that are quality, that help our team schedule. Scheduling is one of those things that many people around the country don't understand how difficult it is. There's really nobody who has a hand in it other than the coaches, maybe some administrators. And so you're trying to, find people to agree to play on dates and to agree on locations that you want to play in, or in maybe a cadence that you're trying to get. That you feel is good for your team going forward. And so a lot of times it becomes difficult just because, hey, there's a lot of different factors that get built into it. And so for our standpoint, agreement with Conference USA and really saying we're going to hold these two dates. We're going to give every team one home, one way game. And it really helps them, solidify, hey, these are two other non-conference games that we don't have to go out there, locate, negotiate, figure out, what this looks like from a financial standpoint, from a travel standpoint, et cetera. They've already can earmark these games in. Hey, listen, I know that, on this date, I'm going to have a road game potentially. On this date, I'm going to have a home game potentially. And we know they're going to be pretty good quality, right? It's going to be a game that's going to go down to the wire. It's going to help us build, our program. It's going to help get people in our building that maybe necessarily have never been there before. I can't speak on it 100%, but when was the last time that Western Kentucky was at Cal Baptist, or Seattle had La Tech in their building, or any of those type of matchups? Utah Valley has Liberty in their building. So we're getting basketball in different, people from different regions that maybe don't necessarily agree to play all the time, play these games and that have become valuable and have become good basketball games. I think that's something too, is we're providing a good product. For fan bases, for TV, for broadcasts, obviously building resumes. We've been able to put together, multiple quad 1, quad 2 opportunities for the teams that maybe necessarily weren't getting built before. And so it's been good. I think hopefully it's fruitful for both sides. I think that's pretty evident at the moment, how close that the matchups have been. We really have teams that are on the same level playing each other.
And conference play ramps back up on January 4th in the new year. And something different we've done this year is have those two conference games in November. And I've talked to a handful of coaches so far who really like it. It changes the way they have to approach the season. And I've never gotten to ask you about, as a former player, what do you think it would be like for you to step into end of November and know that you have two conference matchups that potentially are going to play a big role when you're looking at the entire season?
Yeah, I think when you look at it that way, you have some games that, hey, all of a sudden we're going to see a familiar foe that we're playing all the time. Hey, you get excited. Hey, I understand that team. Sometimes in non-conference, just depending on where you are, again, we just talked about teams that you don't necessarily play all the time. You don't always know the caliber of the opponent you're playing. Whether or not you're up for this game or not. Sometimes coaching wise, you're trying to tell a team, hey, this is a really good program. They're maybe from out of region, maybe a team that you don't see on TV every night, or a team that you're not familiar with that's coming in. Sometimes the motivation becomes more difficult. I think in a conference matchup, it's built-in motivation, right? You see these teams, multiple times a year. You're going to see them twice. You're going to see them in Vegas. You're playing against them. You're seeing them in your standings as you're moving up, you're moving down. And those games, like you mentioned, do have a great deal of meaning. And so I think that part of it really gets you up for that early part of the season. I thought we saw competitive matchups. We saw some maybe upsets. We saw some road victories. We saw some home, good home victories. I think so it's good. I think it gives us an early taste. I think the biggest part, and maybe we'll talk about it a little bit later, but what it does to your schedule after Christmas is really what it does. And so by us moving those two games early kind of gives teams a little bit of a break post Christmas, as opposed to throwing you right into that fire on maybe December 27th or 28th, where that's difficult. The NCAA mandates they got to have 3 days minimum off for Christmas time. And so you're sending them home. Most times you're not, you're letting them have Christmas at home, or you're flying them home on Christmas, practicing on Christmas night. And especially if you're playing on the 27th or 28th, you have to do that. You have to be there. You have to practice on Christmas. You have to practice on the 26th. And then maybe you're either traveling on the 26th or the 27th to get where you're going. And so by us moving those games earlier, it really kind of relieved that pressure a little bit right after, gave teams back a little bit of decision making on how do they want to handle that post-Christmas time. Do they want to play a game on the 27th or 28th, or would they rather take a longer gear up and play the game on the 30th or the 31st or the 1st? We have teams playing, non-conference games and all in that range. And then we can kick back on WAC conference play on January 4th, or, with that Thursday, and we get started. And so I think all that kind of factors into it. I think it creates a different dynamic. But yeah, I'm curious to talk to some coaches, like you mentioned. I think some of them before were intrigued by the opportunity. Other ones are hesitant by the opportunity just because of preparation. Your teams are different in early November than they are in January, and that's just part of it. But I think it's a trend that we see across the country with several other conferences playing games earlier in that pre Christmas time. And I think it's probably something we see going further as these conferences kind of add to the number of games they play and trying to fitting into the calendar. This is actually a long calendar year, and we're about in 2 years or so play a short calendar year, and then that's going to compress the schedule a little bit more, and it probably is going to lead to more of these happening around the country.
So we had Wayne Lord on the show last week, and Kendra talked to him, and he mentioned he really liked that schedule because a place like Edinburgh can be hard to find a quality Division I team to come down, and having that opportunity to schedule those Conference USA games within that, basically month of December. But getting back to your point about Christmas and the holiday season, having that mandatory break, and this really fitting in better. You've been around basketball your whole life, player, coach, now administrator. As far as what do teams do now? I mean, we're going to be heading out for a few days. That's got to be tough as a coach, maybe as a player, because you got this time off, but then right around the corner is conference basketball.
Yeah, it's a unique time of year when you're a basketball coach. Really, from the time, or when you're a player, even from the moment you're done with finals, you have all that break. It's usually about a month of no students on campus. Very few people. The campus is much more mellow. You play home games and maybe your crowds are a little bit lacking because you don't have the students, or because people are traveling for Christmas or holiday season, etc. And so you're really in this time period where you have to, you really get closer as a unit. You take more time, you have more practices, you may have shoot arounds, you have more meals together. There's just nothing else on your plate except basketball. And so that's really what this time of year is about. And a lot of coaches look at it as this is our really good opportunity to grow as a unit, whether that's getting closer together off the court, whether that's putting in new offenses or defenses, preparing for the long haul, like you mentioned, of conference play, whether that's individual improvement and taking extra time out because we have so much time during the day now. You don't have classes in the morning and study halls and all those other items that were on your players' schedules before. they're not there. And so, hey, maybe that's a shooting workout in the morning. That's a weights right after that. Maybe it's a break for lunch. Maybe it's coming back, getting in offense and defensive work and kind of spending more time together. So that's really that time. And then you kind of hit this period now where, we have some teams that played last night even that are done before Christmas. They don't play another game before Christmas. So their players are probably going home. They're probably spending some time with family, which is much earned and much deserved. And kind of, taking a beat, getting away for a second. And then they're, like I mentioned before, a lot of people are going to come back right after Christmas, and then you got to build it back up. Everybody's kind of been home. They had 4 or 5 days, maybe. They maybe ate some good Christmas food, some good meals, etc. Maybe they weren't running as much as they were. They got to get back in shape. And so then it's kind of this, hey, we got to gear it back up depending on what your post-Christmas schedule looks like. If you have an early game, like I mentioned, maybe it's a little bit more prep right away. If you have a later game, maybe it's, hey, it's 2 days of more like a preseason early on practice where you're working on getting your conditioning back. You're working on, getting drills, getting rhythm, all those things. And then like we're going to roll right into conference play, and you still probably have that 2 or 3 weeks of early conference play where there isn't any students and there isn't anybody on campus still. And so you're kind of still in that mode as you prepare. So it's a unique time when you're on a staff, when you're a player, when you're a coach. And in the outside, doesn't necessarily understand that hey, just because students aren't around, et cetera, like these individuals are working hard. They're putting a lot of time in during this period.
You mentioned Lane Lord. He's going to Jamaica for a few days and getting some much needed rest. He said he was really excited about that before he gets back to focusing on conference play. And you yourself have gotten to go to a few of these schools and see some quality WAC basketball in person this year. Abilene Christian at UTEP. I know that was a highlight game because Brett Tanner, head coach of Abilene Christian, was facing off against his old coach, Joe Golding, who also coached Abilene Christian. And it was just supposed to be an emotional night all around. From your perspective, what was that type of a game to see Abilene Christian, come out on top, but also, the familiar faces reuniting in that gym?
Yeah, it was great. We were there. I went with Commissioner Thornton. We went to a couple of games this week, and obviously that was one that you look at. Hey, this is not only one that we've put on the schedule from our Conference USA initiative, but it's also one that had a great storyline, like you mentioned. And I thought Abilene did a great job of bringing back players from their NCAA tournament run when they beat Texas. They had a lot of guys there. They did a recognition prior to the game with Coach Golding and Coach Tanner and all the other folks. There's actually quite a few other staff members on either staff that were a part of it that have kind of, obviously gone their separate ways at this moment. And the thing about Coach Tanner, Coach Golding is they're good friends. They've been together for a long time. And so a game like that, they're getting up for each other, but they're also similar in what they do. The game was very similar as, they're both trying to play similar styles. It was very back and forth. And obviously Abilene comes out on top, and it was a good moment for them. Obviously, a good win, playing a team like UTEP, who, again, another one that's probably, I don't even know if has ever been in their building. And obviously they have a great building there. And then I thought the community was there, and they did a good job of supporting that game. And so, but yeah, it was exciting seeing that one. And then we were able to see, like you mentioned, a couple other games this week, which has been good. We were at Tarleton on Monday, and we were at Stephen F. Austin on Tuesday. So, a lot of good basketball this week, and even last night, and hopefully, tonight and the next couple of nights while we have games, and then we'll take that little break until we see them after Christmas.
Yeah, we did see Grand Canyon beat Sam Houston last night as well. And Drew, when you're putting these pairings together, that the last year's records were a factor as well. It wasn't just willy-nilly about putting teams together. There was some strategy behind it.
Correct. We worked with Kevin Pauga, who does a lot of work with scheduling around the country, and the Conference USA's office, my counterpart there, and then ourselves. We kind of come up with a formula that was trying to keep teams that from previous year net were similar playing field, as far as if you were the best team in net, you probably end up playing one of the teams that was high in net the year before. And I think we saw that kind of early on with Liberty and Grand Canyon, who were high level net teams last year. Even Sam Houston, Grand Canyon, both, Sam Houston was one of our highest net teams last year when they were in our league. And obviously Grand Canyon was up there as well, from our standpoint. So, that was really the genesis of it. We kind of came to it a little bit differently this year, as we will probably next year going into it. I think we're looking at much more of a 1-versus-1, 2-versus-2 type down the line. We have a little bit more hard lines date set, where these dates were kind of all over the place, depending on some teams who already had some games on their schedule and that kind of thing. So we had to be a little bit flexible working in the schedule there. But going forward, it's really dependent on how you do this year, and earning those games at the level that you would get for next year. So that's really what we're doing to take into account.
We've had some big wins on the men's side, some signature wins, and on the women's side, we've also seen some great wins. Grand Canyon taking down Arizona State, Southern Utah, last year's tournament champs, beat New Mexico. From your lens on the women's side, what have you noticed? We had California Baptist that started 8-0 on an 8-game win streak and really looked good early on. As we look at the standings, and they'll continue to fluctuate as we go into conference play, what kind of stands out to you?
I think that what you just mentioned is right on. We had Cal Baptist come out the gates hot, winning 8 in a row. They're 9-1 now. I think that they've done a tremendous job in the early season. Obviously I think that they had some great turnover from last year. And so coach has done a great job of getting this group together. And I think that that's kind of the theme of the new age of college basketball, we'll call it, right? You have constant turnover, and you're going to have to get your team, on the same page quickly. But to your point too, Grand Canyon obviously winning at Arizona State. They've had some other pretty good wins. They were on the road. They've won some road games. They've won some good home games. And so I think that they're obviously in position. I think they're 8-3 now. And then we even had Utah Tech take down Oregon the other night. Obviously they did a great job scheduling, and had a tournament where they had Oregon and Oklahoma State in their building this week. And I think that's great. I think that's great notoriety. I think it's great for them. I was down there and actually saw a game early that they played. And so, obviously they've done a good job as well. And Stephen F. Austin has put together some good wins. And so I think, there's been some good moments on the women's side as well. I think that there's a lot of turnover still. We have new coaches, a lot more new coaches on that side. We have new teams, a lot of turnover. And so I think that we're still building, and we're still could see a lot of parity as we get into the WAC play.
Well, hey, Drew, I want to thank you for taking some time out. A lot of good information there. If you're a basketball junkie, we'll push this out. I'm learning a lot as we're doing the podcast here today. So that's Drew Speraw, our Associate Commissioner for Basketball, and we want to thank everybody for listening to the WAC Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the WAC Podcast. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And check out our website at wacsports.com.